In all business decisions, there are relevant and irrelevant factors that can affect the decision outcome. It is important to identify and organize these factors prior to making a decision in order to achieve the most desirable outcome. Before looking over a real-life example, let's cover a few definitions. Relevant costs are defined as those that occur in the future and differ between decision alternatives. These costs should be considered as they have yet to be incurred. Irrelevant costs are defined as those that will not influence the decision, either because they have already been incurred or because they do not differ between the decision alternatives. It would not benefit the decision maker to consider these costs, as they have either already happened in the past or would be incurred regardless of which alternative was decided upon. Sunk costs are those that have been incurred at some point in the past. These costs are irrelevant as they will have remained incurred regardless of the final decision between the two alternatives. To illustrate, suppose you were deciding between taking a part-time job at a school and taking a full-time position at a retail store. Let's first consider the relevant costs associated with these two alternatives. The first relevant factor would be how far the two different jobs are from your home. If the school location of the part-time job is closer to you than the location of the retail full-time job, this would be considered a relevant cost. It would take you more time to get to work and return home each day if you chose to take the full-time job, making this factor one that differs between the two choices. Another relevant cost would be the received pay. If the full-time job pays you $25 an hour, while the part-time job pays you $10.50 an hour, this significant pay difference would impact your decision. The two different pay choices between the two alternatives are relevant, as you would be paid more taking the full-time position. Gasoline used in your vehicle would also be a relevant factor. Taking the job that is closer to home would mean filling up your tank less frequently, saving you a large chunk of money. Alternatively, the job that's further away would cost you more in gas. Irrelevant costs associated with this decision would include utilities to be paid for your home. Regardless of which job you take, you will still have to pay your utilities. You are not relocating as a result of taking either position, so this cost would be considered irrelevant as it does not differ between the two options. Clothing to be purchased for your upcoming employment would also be considered an irrelevant cost. Each job will result in the eventual purchase of work-appropriate clothing, so this cost would not be considered a relevant factor, as it would have to be incurred regardless of your decision. Rent to be paid for your home is another example of an irrelevant cost. Because you will not be moving as a result of either position, this factor is unchanging between the two decision alternatives and should have no impact on the decision-making process. Sunk costs would include the past purchase of your vehicle. This cost will have been incurred regardless of the decision outcome. Since it is not a future cost, it should not be considered alongside relevant factors. Another example of a sunk cost would be the purchase of your computer. Even if there is a possibility of you using the computer for work, it was still purchased in the past with no relation to either of the two decision alternatives. In conclusion, in order for the cost to be relevant, it must occur in the future and differ between the alternatives. Irrelevant costs do not differ between alternatives or have been incurred in the past. Finally, sunk costs are those that were incurred in the past, making them irrelevant to the decision-making process. Thanks for watching, and may all your business decisions result in the best outcome. Happy decision-making!
Created using Powtoon.